Hi, welcome to John's Jeep Garage. This video is about changing the valve cover gasket on the driver's side of a Jeep Wrangler JK 3.6 liter. Now, earlier in our channel, you'll see that we did a video changing the passenger side valve cover gasket, which was a little more difficult, as well as that included changing the PCV valve. On this video, we're just replacing the gasket, the phaser actuator, replacing those seals, and replacing the seal for the cam sensor that's on top. When you buy a kit, when you buy a valve cover seal or gasket kit, it usually comes with both sides. So we'll show you in our video the kit that we used, and we'll just walk you through the steps. Thank you for watching. Oil was dripping on my exhaust and the driver's side of my Jeep, so I started to inspect a little bit more, and guess what? Backside of my valve cover was leaking. All right, so let's start this project. First, let's remove our engine cover. We actually have a more detailed video on our channel if you want to take a look at it. Put it off to the side, and then we always disconnect the negative terminal of our battery. I have these plastic battery caps I get with new batteries, so I just use that as extra protection. Take the 10mm bolts out of the intake hose, mounting clamps, and then go use your 8mm for the worm screws. Now you have an air temp sensor that you need to take off. Press that tab and set it off to the side. All right, so let's go to the ETC harness. That's electronic throttle control. Press the tab, pull out. Then we move to the MAP sensor, manifold absolute pressure sensor, tab again, and pull out. And then we have a brake booster vacuum supply hose. Just pull that out as well. Now to the back of the manifold. Use a retaining clip removal tool if you have one, or a flathead screwdriver, and let's get this foam insulation at the firewall side removed. Remove the fuel vapor purge hose and the PCV hose from the passenger side of the manifold, and then just kind of clear the hoses because there's two bolts right there, 10mm, that we're going to remove. All right, so we have 7 8mm bolts that we need to remove from the upper manifold. One thing I want to say is that back corner one, you're going to need a universal joint adapter, which we use, which makes it very easy to get to. Again, there's only 7. Now, the top 3 you want to pull up and turn about 90 degrees so they stay up. But to remove this, you got to make sure every one of them are out. So if you look, those 3, we're just pulling up, and then make sure the other ones are loose enough so you can pull this out. I do remove the 4 lower ones and set them to the side. The upper manifold on the driver's side has 2 brackets, a front and a rear bracket, that helps secure the manifold. They're 10mm nuts. Now, I just remove these nuts, set them off to the side, and later I will shift the manifold towards the passenger side to remove. Some people remove these brackets to better enable them to remove the upper manifold. I'm not going to speed this up because I want you to see this in real time, but the secret of removing the upper manifold is to ensure that all the bolts are loose, those 4 on the left are removed, and that you are able to shift the manifold to the left to clear those 2 brackets. Once you remove this, I put paper towels in those valve openings to ensure nothing falls in. We need to take off the ignition coil electrical connectors. You just press the little tab and pull out. And you got 3 of them on that side, so you have to pull out. And then you have the retaining clips that you see right here. Just follow along, make sure that there's not any others on your Jeep. And then we'll work our way to the front, and there's a bracket here. I'm going to take off its 10mm socket. In this Jeep, it only has 1 bolt, but there's normally 2. So you have your cam phaser actuators, and those also are just press the tab and pull out. There's two of them. One's a little shorter wire, one's longer, and now you just need to move those wires to the side. Once we've removed our ignition coils, we now need the fuel injector electrical connectors. Now the problem is on this Jeep is that the red locking tabs were broken, one of the tabs were broken, so I had to, here you see one of them. So really you're just supposed to pull that red tab out, and then you see that one's broken. You need to press, let's see on this one, I think it's the only one that's actually whole. You got to press that tab. But now I'm just going to work on the driver's side of this valve cover and start removing all the retaining clips that I see, especially around that bracket, that rear bracket, because I am going to loosen that bracket. As I'm looking around at all of the retaining clips, just start looking at your vehicle and start pulling them all out. I'm just going to continuously pull the hoses back, make sure I'm clear, and see which retaining clips still exist. If you want to remove the AC compressor connector, let me show you how to do it with a pick. I did not remove this. Then you squeeze and pull out. I was able to pull these wires underneath and out of the way without removing the AC electrical connector. Just be careful and keep it clear. So now I remove the ignition coils, but I use a universal joint adapter, and I use my 10mm socket, and then pull each of them out carefully and put them off to the side. On the back of the valve cover is a cam position sensor. I need to remove the red tab, but I actually push it like I showed in the video to make sure it's out, and then I squeeze, push down, and pull out. And then next we have the coming from the air intake box, the fresh air makeup hose. So I call this the return, and I just pull that out as well and then tuck it out of the way. Okay, so my goal is to be able to take out that threaded stud on that bracket. So I need to clear the wiring and any retaining clips out of the way, and there's that connector that's just connected to that bracket as well. And then I'm going to just start trying to clear wires. So number one, I want to get room for the valve cover, but I also want to be able to have room to access the lower against studs on that bracket so I can loosen it up. Now if you can get an impact wrench, that's great, but I have a 13mm gear wrench that I'm using because it's easy to get to this way. And then I'm going to remove that one, and then I'm going to loosen up the other one just so I can pivot that bracket. All right, we got movement here. All the wires are clear, retaining clips clear. Let's start to take this valve cover off. We got 12 bolts. We're using an 8mm socket. Now, I'm using a universal joint adapter on the end of this. It really helps. And especially in this on the back corners. If you notice that U-joint, if you didn't have it, it'd be pretty tough trying to get it out of there. Now the only way we're going to get the rear center one off is to be able to take the cam sensor off, which requires a T30 Torx. All right, now that sensor, it's long and you got to angle it when you pull it out. And now you can go ahead and get that rear center bolt. One thing to let you know, all these bolts, they're attached to the valve cover, so you need to ensure that every one of them are loose and the threads are not connected before you remove the valve cover. Be careful removing the valve cover. Do it slowly, make sure all the bolts are out, and then your gasket is going to either be stuck on the cover or stuck down on the base. Make sure you remove all gasket material. Now right where the timing cover is, there's a seam, and that's where some RTV is going to be located, and that's where before you put it back on you're going to have to put RTV, so you're going to have to scrape this off. So I need to remove the old sealant on both sides, but first I'm going to wipe everything down and get any oil and just build up off of that seam. And then I'm going to use a flat razor and set that up to go ahead and get the RTV off, but I do it carefully because I don't want anything to fall in, and you don't want to scratch the mating surface either. In later steps, I'm going to show you we're going to reapply RTV before putting the valve cover back on. I like to wipe everything down, remove any oil and dirt, especially my vehicles. But I really want to just make sure everything is kind of clean and I can just inspect for any type of cracks potentially or anything else. There are 3 spark plug chamber seals that we need to remove, and I use a 3/4 inch socket because it's the right size, and I just press it into the hole. And if you notice, watch me press, and it's just going to give way and the seal is going to come out, and then we can look. Now, does this work like this all the time based on the seal? No. Sometimes they rip, they tear, and you got to look at other methods. I'm not going to speed through this part of the video. I want to really show you. So there's a chamber seal or tube seal, and there's it removed. So let's just go through this process again. I'm going to take a 3/4. Now 21 millimeter can work sometimes, but try the 3/4, and you press it down and it'll pop out just like that. Now on this third one, it ripped, so I had to take a screwdriver and then now a pair of pliers just to kind of pull it out, and inside there's a wire band. The problem here is you don't want to damage the plastic housing around that seal, so you have to be very careful. Now I also go through and I clean everything up just around the seal, because when I put new seals back, I just don't want there to be any debris or anything creating a bind. Now I'm using a seal puller tool. You can use flathead screwdriver, and this is that cam position sensor seal, and the kit you buy will have all these new seals. And again, I'm just cleaning up, wiping down around every one of these areas. I believe in cleaning to inspect. Now, these are cam phaser actuators. There's 2 of them, T25 Torx. Now you'll see on some other videos, people say mark them so you know which one went where. Don't listen to them, because on the Jeep 3.6 liter, on the JKs, these cam phaser actuators are the same one. When you go and you order a part, they're exact same one. Now, let's go remove the cam phaser actuator seals. I'm going to tell you to clean up around there, because your kit will have the new seals for this as well. Pretty much when you order a kit, you get the kit for both sides and you get all the seals that are required. Next, I want to wipe down the cam position sensor, and then I'm going to put on the new seal. You can put the seal on the opening as well as the cam sensor. Here we're going to put it on the cam sensor and make sure it seats, and then we'll just set it off to the side until we install it. We'll put the valve cover on before we install this. Now, in your bag of seals, there's a spark plug chamber seal or spark plug tube seal. I want you to pay attention. See how one side has kind of like a point or an edge, and the other side has the slot? With the valve cover positioned this way, we're going to position it with the slot side down and the edge side up. And so press with your fingers. Now I'm not going to speed through this because I want you to see exactly how to install this. We're going to use a 1 1/16 inch socket, and that is the perfect size so that you can press this down all the way. So I'm just going to press and then show you. Now again, I'm not speeding this up. I just want to show you. See how that one doesn't have, that one has the seal. The center one doesn't have the seal, but you want to have that groove side down. You want to kind of straighten it up with your fingers, and then you're going to need to use that socket to press it all the way in. And once it seats, you can feel it. Turn it around and make sure there's no gaps, and then you can kind of look and you can see it's pressed up against the edge. I like ensuring there's no debris, so I take a Q-tip and run it along the edge where that gasket is going to go in to make sure it is clean. I'm going to try to explain this the best way possible. When you look at this gasket, there's a square and a tab that you have to fit into these sections on the valve cover. Now, if you kind of follow along as you see me do this, I think the best way is to show you how it's positioned once the gasket is in. Because if you look at one side, the square and the tab are actually closer together right here. And then on the other side, it's a little bit further apart, about another inch apart. But you see that the tab's kind of on the upper edge of that gasket, and you want to make sure it's seated effectively. Now you have the cam phaser actuator seals. You just press them into the slot, press them down, kind of follow it along, make sure they're seated well. You got 2 of them. They come in the kit. Do the other side. I try to not fast forward so that you can just see if you've never done this before. All right, so now that we know that these seals are in, we got to get our cam phaser actuators. Remember, it's a T25 Torx. I like to hand thread the screws in, and we'll go ahead and put them in. And then I got an inch-pound torque wrench, and we're going to set this at 35 inch-pounds. Don't over tighten. Now, before installation, we're going to put our RTV. We're going to apply it at the seam of the cylinder head and the timing cover where the old RTV was. And you don't want to wait too long because you don't want the RTV to set. So you want to go ahead and put your valve cover on. Clear the lines so that you have a clear path to install the valve cover. Now, you got 12 bolts in there, and so they got them made up into the holes. And if you notice, there's a gap on the edge facing front where the RTV is. You don't really want to smear that RTV, but you got to align each one of the bolts with the hole. I'm not going to fast forward this because I want you to see, how I did it in real time. But once you get everything aligned, you'll be able to set it down and then put everything in place. Now, a lesson is you're supposed to tighten everything from the center out, but I always just go to the stopping point where the RTV is first. Then I will go to the center and I'll torque everything from the center out. So I'm going to tighten all the bolts until they stop, but then you'll see that I'm going to use the torque wrench from the center first and then go out. Now your targeted torque is about 106 inch-pounds, so between 104 and 108 inch-pounds. All right, so let's put on the cam position sensor. There's a little bracket in there that has a threaded hole. You need to line it up. The other thing is you need to make sure the electrical connector faces towards the firewall when you position it. And I suggest do not tighten all the way with an impact. Tighten with a hand ratchet. That way you can ensure it seats and is positioned correctly. I'm only using it to about the last 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to use a ratchet to tighten the rest of the way. And then after that, of course, we're going to torque it, and we're going to torque it to 80 inch-pounds, and you don't want to over tighten that. Okay, let's take a look at where we are. We got the fresh air makeup hose we got to put on, the 3 fuel injection connectors, and we'll start with the fresh air makeup return hose. Just seat that all the way, put the cam sensor connection on the back, and then let it click and then push in the red locking tab. Now, if you remember, when I was doing the fuel injector connections, I had some red broken tabs and some missing. I'm positioning it all the way until I feel that it has a firm seating or click. But if you are doing it, make sure you press down the red locking tab, lock them in position. As you're doing this, look at your retaining clips and reinstall them. as you kind of go through all of your wires and cables. Okay, it's time to put the ignition coils back in. Center them and then press them down, make sure they seat. Go ahead and reinstall your ignition coil connectors, ensure they snap, and then you get your 10mm socket. Remember, I use that universal joint, and you're targeting about 70 to 80 inch-pounds. So when I say that range, I usually just target 75. Okay, we have that loose rear mounting bracket. It's with the 13mm stud bolts. I took one bolt off and loosened one. You can either use your gear wrench or a ratchet and tighten it back up, and I just go into a snug fit. Reconnect the cam phaser actuator connectors. One's a little longer, which goes off closer to the passenger side, and the one that's shorter connects to the driver's side. Alright, for about the next 30 seconds on this video, I'm just reinstalling the retaining clips. I kept this in the video just in case any of these help jog your memory on ones that you may have pulled out that you forgot to reconnect. But I go through and I just really kind of, my hand traces each one of those wires to ensure that I've reconnected everything. Let's loosely install that front manifold bracket. We'll tighten it later. And now let's take the paper towels that we put blocking each one of those valves out, because we're going to install the upper manifold. Now my approach is I kind of angle it to the passenger side, and you want to get that end, passenger side end, under that bracket. Keep the hoses and wires out of the way and clear. Okay, so look at the manifold bolts. It's why it's a good idea to keep the brackets loose. Position the rear one inside that bracket, and also the front one. You want to make sure that it's aligned correctly. Now you want to check the passenger side to make sure the manifold is underneath that bracket. And I'm going to go ahead and put the 4 nuts on, but I'm not going to tighten them yet. I'm just going to do it to hold them in position on the brackets. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the manifold bolts in and at least screw them down before I torque them, before tightening those bracket nuts. I just hand tighten them, and then I'm gonna put the 4 that are on the passenger side in as well. Again, right now I'm just positioning them and hand tightening them. And that one in that back rear corner, it's always been a challenge, but I use a U-joint adapter so that I can have access to it, and I'm still gonna hand tighten it. Okay, well, you know, I'm just gonna tighten everything down till it stops, and then I don't tighten to a hard torque. What I do is I tighten to a snug fit, but if I'm putting a torque measurement on here, I put everything at about 30 inch-pounds. Reinstalling those 2 bracket bolts. Remember, you need a 10mm socket. I just go to a snug fit on those as well. Okay, we're going to tighten up the nuts on the front and the rear bracket, but make sure that you've also tightened those brackets up against the engine block. Have some reinstall fun. Brake booster vacuum supply hose on the side. Then on top, we have the electrical connector for the manifold absolute pressure sensor, or you call it MAP sensor. And then in the front, we have the ETC harness, or the electronic throttle control harness. Make sure they all just snap in. And then we have to install our air intake hose, and to do that, underneath we have that air inlet temperature sensor. So just make sure that's aligned correctly, and make sure that clicks when it goes in as well. And then we'll install both ends of the hoses on the manifold, as well as the air filter housing box. Make sure that coolant hose is up above because it's easy to get caught below. Reconnect the fuel vapor purge hose and then the PCV hose, that positive crankcase ventilation hose. And on the side, just get all your hoses back in the appropriate slots on that connecting rail. Reinstall those 10mm bolts on the intake hose mounts. This Jeep only had one. And then you got worm screws. Instead of using a flathead screwdriver, I just use an 8mm socket, and I do a snug fit. Everything fits good, and then we're going to put that foam insulation on the firewall side of the manifold. There's 2 retaining clips. Put it in. Then we're going to install the engine cover. Now, we have a video dedicated to removing and installing engine covers on our video. Reinstall the negative terminal on your battery. Normally this is a 10mm bolt, depending on the connection you have. And then test it and run it. Check for leaks. All right, that's a wrap. I want to highlight something for you because this is important. If you're doing a job and you're taking something apart and you're already there, you may want to consider doing some other things. So the upper manifold gaskets, that's visible and easy to do once you're that far into the process. Changing your spark plugs on that side, and then you can go do it on the other side, but that's something you could do. Changing your ignition coils, that's something you can do. We've done all those, so that's why they're not highlighted in the video, but just think about when you're doing any job and you get that far, what are some other things that may be time to take care of. Besides that, we really hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit the like button for this video and consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you for watching.